welcome everyone. I'm Neil Shapiro, the judge coordinator, and Greg Holden, you see on the top, if it's on your top, is our judge tonight. I'll read you his intro. And actually, good thing I read your the one you supplied today, because you gave us some more facts I could throw in there. So it's a bit long, but it's not too long. Okay, well, Greg Holden is a photographer from Longmont, Colorado, who uses his photography to share with others how he sees the world. He enjoys creative photos of little scenes, often overlooked by others rather than postcard landscapes. Although he won't pass by a chance to photograph a beautiful landscape or a tranquil sunset, he'd rather be exploring abandoned places and capturing the details of the layers of paint and rust on a discarded automobile. He finds inspiration from master photographers and a wide range of subjects, such as the close-up beach studies by Minor White, the early portraiture of Steichen and Stiglitz, and street scenes by Andre Kertész. I haven't heard of him. He enjoys teaching others and sharing his passion for photography, and continues to speak and judge virtually at clubs through the Maryland and Virginia areas. You can see Greg's work on his website, imagesunderfoot, that's one word, .com, and we'll share that in the chat in a bit. And then he supplied a few fun facts, which are interesting. Greg moved to Denver, Colorado on January 19th and works as an aerospace engineer at Ball Aerospace, the same company as the Ball Jar and Canning Corporation. Before moving to Colorado, Greg was active in camera clubs in Maryland, taught at Capitol Photography in DC, and was a regular judge and speaker at clubs throughout Maryland and Virginia. He still speaks and judges at East Coast camera clubs via Zoom several times a year. Greg has over 150 books on and about photography, but less than 10% of them are about camera instruction. Most are portfolios of well-known photographers from the early to mid-1900s, such as Alfred Stieglitz, Minor White, Elliott Porter, Man Ray, and Maryland native A. Aubrey Bodine. He enjoys searching used bookstores for photo collections by lesser-known photographers such as Joseph Sudek, Czechoslovakia, Harry Callahan, and Paul Campanegro. I said that right. My last editions, his last editions, Fall 2022, are a book about Czech photography of the 20th century and a book on composition by Harold Ross. Greg's favorite contemporary photographer is David Duchemin, and he enjoys his podcasts and online workshops. I keep forgetting to change the person. Greg prefers to create interesting photos that make you think rather than pretty pictures. Greg has been a serious photographer for over 16 years, since his wife bought him his first DSLR for Christmas, a Nikon D50. Within a year, he was already talking about upgrading his camera. Greg now has 4 tripods, including 2 carbon fiber, 4 camera bodies, 12 lenses, 5 camera bags, and a partridge. No, I did that one in. And a drawer full of accessories he just really needed once upon a time. Other than his light painting composites, he doesn't use Photoshop or his editing. He currently uses Lightroom with On1 and DxO's Nik Collection plugins. Everyone, welcome Greg.
Thank you, everyone. So hopefully
all those names so that we all can look up some of the photographers we don't already know. Yes.
Yeah, so I just put in the chat Andre Kertész. So he is probably one of my all-time favorite photographers. He does a lot of portraiture and street scenes, which is interesting because that's one of the things I photograph the least. But per my bio, I definitely draw inspiration from all kinds of people. And Andre Kertész has quite an interesting story about his life as a photographer. I'll share with you some other time. But thanks again for inviting me, and look forward to getting into showing the images and talking about them.
Okay. All right, we'll jump right in. Welcome everybody. The December General Monochrome competition. And thanks to Greg here for judging. And thanks for getting back to me quickly. Okay, let's get on the road. I share my screen here. Hold on one second. There you go. All right. Everybody see that?
Yep.
All right. We have 48 images in the general category. We have 5 places and 4 honorable mentions. So without much further ado, let's jump right in. And our first image up is Can We Bring Home, Please Mommy, Alan Wiggins.
And did you want me to comment on each one as they come up,
Yeah.
or you want to run through them once first? How do you want to do it?
No, you can comment them on each as they come up. Just to, short.
Yeah, so this one, kind of capturing a good moment. I wasn't a big fan of the framing of this with these whitish gray inverse vignettes put on. It didn't work for me. I guess the angles didn't kind of align with any of the angles in the image. I really liked the interaction of the girl with the horse, which was, I guess, kind of the title there. But then we have the little brother down there at the bottom. He doesn't look so sure about the horse. So to me, that was a little bit of a disconnect between the theme maybe you're going with and the borders. So neat idea, but I couldn't get into this one mainly because of the framing.
Okay. Next up is Red versus Blue, Alan Wiggins.
So this is kind of neat, this kind of interplay of the people. What's interesting, obviously, is the poster of this, happy child, and then the 2 people below look so disinterested. The kid, fiddling with something, and the dad looks, worn out from the day. So it's nice, they frame the dad in between the pigtails of the girl. So it's a nice kind of image to me. It's a little bit of a snapshot, I guess. So I wasn't as drawn to this image as some of the other ones you had.
Next up is Birds and Flags, Connie Frisbee Hood.
So this was neat with the kind of juxtaposition of all the birds coming up over this temple with perhaps Thai or something. To me, I wasn't quite sure where my eye was supposed to go with this. It's almost like we have a couple of different images here, and the photographer saw a lot of great stuff and said, well, more is more, and put more into the photo. So the birds in flight with kind of being backlit are interesting. This temple on the left, it's gilded, the gold is kind of nice. But then we have these big masses at the bottom. The white kind of dome in the lower left is not particularly interesting. And then this dark mass in the lower right with this little bit of red ruffle. So it's just, those are very heavy. They're like big anchors that kind of draw your attention down, and they're not as interesting as the other parts of the picture. So I think photographers should have shifted their gaze up a little bit and focused on the birds in flight, more the tops of the temples, which are interesting, and then the little prayer flags there. And I think that would have made a more pleasing composition. So,
okay. Next up is Lone Tent, Connie Frisbee Hood.
this was interesting. I didn't even actually see the tent at first because it's kind of off to the corner and the colors blend in a little bit. And I was kind of drawn to these structures in the middle of the frame. So this is a nice kind of scenic with the wonderful greens and yellows on the hillside here in the foreground. Then we got a lot of layers to it with the background, with the different hills, the snow-capped mountains, and interesting clouds. And so it's all kind of balanced really well. I guess I was curious of the title, the lone tent, and yes, there is a lone tent in here. But if you look at the composition, where the tent is placed versus the size of it compared to everything else, to me, it's like I wouldn't even call it a supporting actor. I'd call it like a walk-on actor or background actor. So if that was really the intention of the photographer to kind of emphasize this tent amongst this beautiful landscape, I would have maybe composed it a little bit different, gotten maybe a little closer to show the tent a little bit bigger. But that aside, it's still a very nice scenic image.
Next up is Tulip, Dan Steen.
This is pretty, some nice kind of backlighting on this tulip and then repeated in the background. A couple of things with this is it looks like here in the foreground we have what's probably a piece of fencing it's out of focus, which is good, but it is kind of a bright white of sorts. It's grayish white, I guess, but it definitely draws my attention because it's a big fat, even though it's out of focus, kind of line at the bottom. And so I don't think it adds to your image, and to me it takes a little away. I would have either kind of put your camera up higher so you wouldn't see that, or just go in close and focus on these pretty backlit flowers. I don't think you need to show the yellow flowers there on the left. You're barely showing any of them as it is. I think all the action is where these pink flowers are. So I would have just cropped in tighter on the upper, 2/3 of this, upper right 2/3 of this image. I think that would be more compelling than what we have here.
Next up is John Brown's Farm, Dan Steen.
This is nice with this reflection here, flags at half staff, unfortunately. Not a good sign. For me, this one, the reflection is nice. You got a nice clear pond here. But this grasses or whatever this is here in the foreground is really, to me, it really takes away from that reflection. We get a little bit of mergers with the roof there in between the two chimneys. And they're just really very busy. And they got some highlights on them. So to me, they're very distracting. I think in this one, you need to, again, put your camera up higher so you can get around those or separate those a little bit from the reflection. Or maybe not include the entire reflection. Everyone sees a pretty reflection and thinks I have to include 100% of the reflection. You don't always have to. You could crop that out and still be an interesting image, just reflecting maybe those windows and stuff like that. So unfortunately, I think that kills it for that. And then we cut off the flagpole at the top. And I know the flags are at half staff, so there's nothing else there to see. But my eye goes to that strong white line and says, well, what else is up at the top? And so I think you need to step back and recompose this slightly differently.
Next up is Thatcher Park, Dennis Johnson.
This is real pretty. I looked at this one for a bit. I'm guessing there's a lot of heavy processing here to get these kind of warm, darker tones. It wasn't until I looked at it, I think the second or third time, that I noticed there's a deer there in the clearing in the bottom. And if you're going to do this heavy of processing to a photo, sky's the limit, I guess. I would have brightened up that deer, really make that clearing at least pop out so I notice the deer a little bit sooner, because these yellow, highlights on the trees are nice. You got this wonderful palette of these kind of soft, chestnutty colors. And I think if I could see that deer a little bit more, that would just really make this image really stand out. So to me, it's a little bit maybe too dark in some areas. So I'd keep processing this a little further.
Okay, next up is Rose, Dennis Johnson.
This is a neat idea with the very shallow depth of field and darkening everything except for the light on the flower. But when you're doing this kind of detailed study, you really got to nail the focus. And this one, to me, it seems very soft, and not soft in the pleasing pictorialist, kind of soft focus genre. It's more like it wasn't focused properly. So that was really distracting to me. Wonderful light on the flower, though. So I like the technique, but I think you need to start with a crisper image.
Next up is B, Donna Funk.
A nice, sharp photo of a bee, which can be challenging. The bees don't sit still very long. They're always fluttering about. So good job nailing the focus on the bee, on this flower. The problem with this image, again, if you're going for a detailed shot, you're going for that close-up, you really got to pay attention to your background. So you nailed the one part, sharpness of your subject, so that's great. But the background is very distracting, especially with those bright yellow colors. And this is probably a factor of a couple of things, probably the factor of your lens and how wide open you can go to blur out the background, as well as how close those yellow flowers are to this flower. You could artificially blur it more in post-processing, but I'm gathering this is maybe more of a beginner intermediate photographer. Somebody doesn't have those skills quite yet. So good job with the sharpness, but I think you need to look for a different flower, a different situation where you can create a more pleasing background, especially with those white flowers down there at the bottom. That really pulls my attention since it's kind of bright, and try to darken that down a little bit.
Okay, next up is Pebble Beach Cove, California, Dow Smith.
So this is pretty. A lot of times we see landscapes as a horizontal orientation. So it's nice to see a vertical orientation of this. A lot of like different angles kind of here in the foreground, and then leading me down to this interesting rock mass down in the water. Almost looks like an HDR, maybe not, but a lot of depth to it. So I like that. It was a nice scenic. I maybe would have trimmed off a little bit of the water off the top, but that's maybe just more a personal preference. But nicely done on this one.
Okay. Next up is Toyland's Wing and Prayer Farm, Vermont. Dow Smith.
So this one made me chuckle when I see it as like, am I counting sheep or Baba black sheep? Or so kind of cute with these little sheep dolls stacked on this paint ladder. So it's cute. Gave me a nice little chuckle. It's kind of just a quick chuckle, grab shot. Maybe not up to the caliber of some of the more inspired images in the rest of the collection.
Okay, next is Moment in Coimbra, Alina Kesey.
This one had a lot, I thought, a lot of potential. When I first saw it, I was like, wow, that's very interesting. But as I studied it more, I think the balance to me is off a little bit. I like the white arches here at the top of the frame, and then we go into total blackness with the shadow there. And then we pick up some really interesting patterns there in the background and the single person lined up. You waited for the right moment to kind of get them lined up in the arch there. But to me, there was a bit too much negative space. I don't mind that it's jet black there in the middle and no shadow detail. It just, as I looked at it more, I just realized I would have rather had less darkness in the middle because it is, if you look at the real estate, more than half of your image space is jet black between what's in the arches and some of the bottom. So I would have put a little bit different emphasis, so I had a little bit more light parts to the image to maybe balance it out, or maybe recover a little bit of shadow detail under this arches, so it wasn't so much black space. So neat idea, but I think some of the balances are off on this one.
Okay, next up is Lazy, Hazy, Crazy Day of Summer.
Well, you guys got to give points for your titles. It's not unentitled too. So this is a pretty scene. Obviously, as you study this one, you can tell a lot of post processing to bring out the shadows in the flowers, or like the front of the flowers, because the thing I think there was a miss here. There's a couple things. One, you have this wonderful sheer curtain behind the flowers, which is kind of pretty in itself, but nicely softens the light. And we start to see a little bit of a rim light on the I guess the line there and the glass bottles. And I would have liked to see a little bit of that backlight, the rim light coming through on the flowers. But because so much light has been put on the front of the flowers, either in post or in artificial light to blend it in, I kind of missed that. So I would have rather just, if you're going to emphasize the flowers like you did, I would have rather just had some sort of plain background. So I don't feel like I'm missing that wonderful soft window light coming in. And then you got a lot of elements here in the bottom. And I see what you're trying to do, mimic some of the colors and some of the shapes of the flowers in the fruit and the macaroons on the plate. But this is a case of sometimes less is more. I think you got a lot going on. I don't think you need the extra jar in the back with the one cookie that's brown. It's not as interesting. I think just a glass of tea with the lime wedge or lemon wedge would have been enough, because your focus should be on the flowers. But having all these other elements, it was a lot. But well done lighting the flowers. They do look impressive, but I think the rest of the image space just needs a little bit of work.
Okay, next up is Red Flowers, Fred Moody.
So this, kind of like the one we saw earlier with the flowers. So this one, it's not as sharp, but that's okay in this particular photo because it's very intentional. It's an artistic, application of filters and whatnot on this one to just give it a more painterly look. We're not going for hyper realism or hyper sharpness here on this one. So it's more of an artistic look here in the Coke bottle, and these kind of roses past their prime. Interesting background here. For me, I like the composition. I like some of the elements. To me, it needed to be just a little bit brighter, just a little bit more inviting. So maybe just a little bit more light on the bottle. Maybe a little pop of shadow recovery in that foremost rose. Just would have made it pop a little bit more. I know this is not supposed to be a pretty photo. It's supposed to be more of a moody photo, but it's just a little bit too dark for my taste. But I think a few tweaks, you could really bring out the best of this.
Next up is Sunset, Fred Moody.
So this is interesting with this reflection here, catching this, I guess, the plain streak. This is good. I like that piece of it. Didn't necessarily like this little plant in the lower left corner. I think you could have cropped off the bottom piece of that image. I mean, it's very dark down there anyway. So I don't think you need that. So it's a nice little tranquil kind of soft scene. We've lost tons of detail in the trees there. That's not really your focus or your attention. It's the pretty sky. I would try to recover your shadows just a little bit there, so it isn't so dark. But very nice, kind of soft, tranquil mood there with the perfect reflection.
Next up is Last Day, Horn, Janice Pritchett.
Yeah, the towns and stuff in Iceland, challenging. So really pretty light on this mountainscape. Tyler's done a good job to catch this reflection almost unobstructed by this little moss tufts here at the bottom. Interesting clouds too. I would have probably tried to brighten up the left side of the sky a little bit. Kind of gray mass of clouds is kind of daunting over there. Would have liked to see it a little bit brighter, and so maybe that's something you could just touch up a little bit. But it's a nice, pretty scenic. Almost a horizon in the middle. I don't know if I go for that one way or the other. I think for me, I like this moss tufts you have here in the bottom. I would like to see a little bit more of those because the mountain itself is kind of soft, and then the clouds you make kind of a soft sky. I think having some of that bright greenery, more of that bright greenery in the foreground would give a nice bit of anchor and kind of punch to this image. And then just the contrast overall would have really just made this pop out a little bit more.
Next up is Icelandic Sunrise, Janice Pritchett.
I like the solar flare burst you have on this. With you, whenever you point your lens straight into a light source, you get the solar flare. We got some nice streaks there going. This one, it seemed, I don't know if it's just the way it was processed or the cameras used. It seemed like the foreground here was really lacking some sharpness, some detail, like it was over processed, like you had really cranked up your saturation to bring out the clouds and the sunset. We called it sunrise, but at the sacrifice of the landmass. So I think you have a good composition here, but I think you need to balance the processing a little bit so it doesn't look so kind of grungy and overcooked, as they say, in the foreground.
Okay, next up is It's a Great Day for a Picnic, Jana Kaywood.
This is really pretty. I like this tree with the layers behind it of the different colors. And here's a great example where you don't have to include everything, right? They come in somewhat tight, cut off the tops of the tree, the edge of the tree, but it looks very intentional. It's like they didn't accidentally cut off the edges of the limbs. It was intentional to focus in and show that tree branch kind of off center and the nice layer of colors. So it's nicely done. Just very, very tranquil. I can see this, printed out, hanging on a wall somewhere.
Next is Abstract Fun in the Fall, Jana Kaywood.
This one, I like the idea with the softness. I don't know if this is multiple exposure, some type of filter you put on to create. I'm seeing all these comments pop up. I'm trying not to read those. Get distracted easily, like, ooh, squirrel. So it's interesting. For me, the thing I like the idea. I like the left half of the image. And the thing I kept coming back to is that dark orange streak just right off center, kind of right above the bit of green. It was really distracting to me because it's just so much denser than the rest of the photo. So if there's a way for you in processing to lighten that up or soften it up or bring out a little bit more color there, I think it would balance it out. Because otherwise, to me, it looks like almost like a streak in the image in the negative or something. I know that's not what it is, but it pulls. It's like a void or rift cut in time and space. It just wants to pull my eyes in, and it's unfortunate because the rest of the image is really pretty.
Next up is multiple exposure Christmas tree, Joe Catronio.
So this is clever. I liked the effect we got here of these kind of these little bunches you get from the lights there, and then the kind of texture you've applied to almost looks like it's some type of watercolor paper texture rag cotton. So it's very clever use. I like the framing and it creates some kind of interesting colors.
Next up is Ojo Wall, Kim Koza.
This one, I liked your idea. There was a lot of this that I loved, the thought that went into it, and this kind of it's a study of lines and colors, and you have more artistic representation. And I kept looking. I looked at this one several times across a couple of days, but there's something was off for me. And for me, I think I finally realized it's the scale of the chair. This orange chair. I love that pop of color, that nice kind of plain shape with some gradation in that orange. That's really pretty to offset the brown wall and the strong metal of the coat hanger. But the scale is off. I think it's too big. It's drawing. It's like a sunrise or something like that. It pulls my eye down into that corner, and then my eye wants to stay down there because it's so bright. And I'd rather want my eye to bounce around the image more. So I think this kind of photo, maybe you have to, I don't know, step back, reposition the chair a little bit differently to get the perspective different. But interesting concept, but it just the scale of the two items didn't work for me.
Next up is Pandora, Linda Thomasula.
This is really pretty with this fog. I think if you had just the image in the middle with a huge fog bank obscuring a lot of the middle, it wouldn't have been as successful as what you have here with the trees at the bottom and then almost the rising fog here is kind of burning off probably for the early morning. So I love that. I think that really helps balance out the other bits of fog and then the sky and the bits of cloud. So it's really nice. This nice little image to kind of bounce around, move around in.
Next up is Fernin Pines, Linda Thomasula.
This is interesting. The contrast of those dead yellow brown ferns against the pine needles. Really great job filling your image space with just these two elements. These green pine needles with some wonderful side lighting. And then the ferns there. I think the cluster of ferns is all right. I just wish there was maybe a little bit less brown to them, a little bit more golden. They're a little bit too dead, perhaps. But your composition is lovely. I love how you captured this side light on these needles. So a lot of neat things to this image.
And next up is the Lights at Namkig, Marguerite Hill.
I love this tunnel, obviously some sort of holiday lights display really brings you in. And when you have these kind of perspective things, it's a photography guideline, not a rule, but you're leading your eye into the center, right? You're leading down this path. And in this case, we're leading to a person that's exiting this tunnel. And I think, this is one of these decisive moment things where you were a little late on the moment. And if that person would just maybe 2 steps sooner, still a little bit more in the tunnel and maybe a little bit more lights on them, creating maybe some sparkles, some interesting highlights on their jacket or the back of their head, I think that would have really added to the image. But as it is, we narrow in, and then I have this dark figure in shadow, and my eyes just want to go in like, who is that? What's going on there? And I can't appreciate because it's so dark. So you could go and try to just artificially lighten the shadows there to bring out the person. They don't have to be super bright, but just a hint more bright than they are now. But I love filling this image with the lights in the tunnel coming in.
Next up is Fall Fury, Neil Shapiro.
This is interesting. I studied this one for a little bit because I guess this waterfall is so big and long, is that we're getting different shutter speeds between what we see in the foreground and the background. The background, the main falls, you got the right shutter speed or not the right, a good shutter speed to really blur that falling water and create that wonderful flossy look. But then the stuff in the foreground is not as blurred, which tells me it's moving probably a little bit slower, right? So we're not quite capturing that moment, that motion as much. So to me, it seems a little disjointed. Like I want the foreground water to be more white, more flowing, like a longer exposure. But I know if you did that, you'd probably have too long an exposure in the background. So although I love the composition here, wonderful colors, did a good job controlling the sky, which can be difficult in these images. I think in this one, this is a case where you really have to take two images, optimize the shutter speed for the big falls in the back, and then optimize the shutter speed for the water in the front, kind of right in the middle there, and then Frankenstein them together, stitch those two photos together. I know that's a little bit more of an advanced technique, but to me, having this brown mass of water here in the middle really takes away from that wonderful flowing water that we see kind of in the middle and in the back of the photo.
Next up is White Birch in Winter, Phil Olivo.
I like the colors of this one. We have a lot of, I guess, some strong lighting. I don't know if it's a flash or whatever went off to accent these birch trees. And then this wonderful, I guess, blue hour in the background created a nice little blue. It was a nice kind of contrast to it. And it's just great to just kind of study the texture of this tree and the bark falling off. That's how these birch trees are. I don't think you needed that bright sun coming up over the branch in the back. I would have tilted my perspective slightly so that was totally obscured. Because I think that's your eyes gravitates to bright spots or very dark spots in an image. So my eye wants to go to that bright spot, and I'd rather have it linger on the lower center part where the interesting birch tree. So I think you just need to shift your perspective a little bit and totally hide that setting sun behind the branch. And then I can really appreciate the pretty blue background that this is offset against.
Next up is Janice, Phil Olivo.
So this is a well-seen image with some type of metal sculpture, almost looks like a jacket or something like that. And then some wonderful gold reflections. So really great job by the photographer of coming in close and really isolating this just to show some of the elements, not have to show the entire sculpture, the entire background. And this is something, if you hear me speak multiple times, one of the things I'm really against is someone that just takes a picture of someone else's artwork, like a sculpture. If you just take a picture of the entire sculpture, I mean, unless you're trying to do it for a magazine and showcase the artist's work, you're not really making it your own. But this is a case where you've taken someone's sculpture and you've made it your own by coming in with some interesting lighting and coming in and cropping in tight and kind of making a different image out of the artwork. So kind of claiming a piece of it for yourself. So it's a good job there.
Next up is a very shy flower shop guard dog. Which stripes to him?
So this was kind of cute with the dog there. It's got kind of one eye checking you out. To me, it's kind of like the lambs hanging on the ladder we saw earlier. Cute little kind of grab shot. Something like this, I would have waited around, maybe wait for the dog to maybe be more towards you or maybe more off to the side and more hidden. I'm not getting the shyness as much as the title seems to lead me to believe. So it's a nice little snapshot, but I think we could have waited for a more interesting moment.
Next up is Ice Cream Envy, Rich Schreibstein.
This one, the look on this lady's face, I can't tell if she's scowling at the guy or thinking she made the wrong choice. What's going on? And then she's got the other guy in the background. He's getting like brain freeze or something. So it's kind of humorous, this display of these different people. I'm not quite sure if you're cropping. You're cropped in kind of really tight here on the left, right up against the guy in the green with his hand in the shake. Maybe you're doing that, I guess, because this person with the black shirt and white pants or whatever, you wanted them out of the picture. But much like one of the other photos I comment on, if your focus is on this lady's expression and her envy of the guy next to her has some type of different ice cream, then make that your photo. You could square crop this and come in tight, cut out Mr. Green Turtle there in the background and square out, and you just see just a little bit of him. I don't know if you can see me, I'm kind of framing up here. And that would really draw emphasis to just the pairing of the woman and the guy in the foreground. And I think that would be more emphasizing what the photographer is trying to get at with that capture versus she's an interesting expression. She's well lit, so my eyes gravitate towards her. But with the other guy and the other elements of background, my eye wants to go around to these other things, and I think that's distracting.
Next up is Vermont Barn, Ron Klein.
Nice treatment on this one to give it kind of that soft, glowy look. Take or leave the white border. But yeah, really kind of nice soft. It's always very tricky with barns, right? You find these barns and a lot of times they're just like this, right? They're all closed up. And because of that, they look very kind of heavy because I don't have a door open. I don't have a person or an animal or a tractor or something going in and out. So you get this big kind of mass there. And so for this one, I mean, it's interesting kind of patina on I say patina, that's really for metal, but interesting kind of distressing on the redwood. I don't think you needed some of that image space on the right where it's just a green field there behind the barn. I maybe would have shifted my perspective a little bit more to the left, put the barn maybe on a little bit more of an angle so it's not kind of broadsiding it as much. But wonderful treatment on the post-processing. Really like that kind of soft palette and glow you've created here.
Next up is Sunrise Over the Mohawk, Brown Spear.
This is I like this one with the reflection of the sunrise there in the kind of marshy area. This one, the tree here on the right, I think is your downfall. It's we're seeing this kind of heavy, gnarly tree. It feels like it's a photo bomber kind of coming in at the last minute. And I know you probably want to include some of that tree because that's where the bright sunrise is back there. So this is, again, a case where maybe just take a step or two to the left and maybe be able to angle around it because the sky itself is really pretty. I don't necessarily need to see the whole bright spot of the sunrise. The sky is interesting. The backlit trees here in the center left are interesting. The reflections on the little ponds here in the foreground are interesting. But that tangling mass on the right really takes my attention away. You can almost put your hand up and cover that up. And you can see it's still an interesting photo without that. You still get all the good bits and none of that distracting mass. So maybe crop this by a 4x5 and crop that out. I think that would be a more pleasing composition.
Next up is Takeoff, Ronald Spear.
This was interesting because I guess I don't do a lot of bird photography, but I'd never seen a bird's wings in that orientation before, right? Everyone's always looking for, straight out or kind of upswept. And so here you caught him on him or her on a downstroke. So that was kind of interesting. So points for being original. With birds, though, it's rarely is it pleasing when we're seeing them from the back and they're flying away from us. Because it's really hard to appreciate the legs or anything like that, or tail feathers, which not super interesting in and of themselves. And really all the actions where is the head, right? Where the animal looking. And so I can't really see that because he's turned and he's a little more out of focus. So interesting for the wing position, but much rather if you had the bird either flying towards you or had multiple birds from the backside might be more appealing. But just a bird running away is usually not the strongest composition.
Next up is Hoarfrost Along the River, Sally Wilson.
This one's really pretty. Again, we have kind of a photo bomber here on the right with this little bit of tree branch. And I know in this case, if you crop that out, you lose a lot of this wonderful little curve of the shoreline here. So that's probably perhaps why you kept it. Could attempt to clone it out. The sky's pretty plain. You might be successful in that. But yeah, that frost on those trees in the background, you know, hoarfrost, really pretty with wonderful light on there, giving that nice kind of golden cast, and then wonderful light early in the morning here on the water. So it's always reverse of the marshy picture we just saw, where this one, the right 3/4 of the image is really impressive, and the left quarter is not as impressive. So you might want to think of, could you sacrifice that curvy shoreline there and crop this like a 4x5, or even as a tight-in panoramic, just on that pretty hoarfrost and the reflection in the blue. See if that maybe makes it more compelling. I'm doing it with my hands now. I think that would make a more compelling image. So you might want to try that.
Next up is Bicycling with New Friends, Sally Wilson.
Nice interaction between these people traveling down this road. I love the nice long straight road. So good composition here with a little bit of the fields and stuff on the side. For me, I would have lightened up the girl's face on the right here because of her darker complexion and the dark kind of dirt and fields on the right. She really starts to blend in her hair and her head. So I think I'd brighten that up a little bit, just so you don't want to make it look too artificial, but brighten up a little bit so it's not quite the right zone level, if you're into Ansel Adams, level of luminosity as the dirt there. So you can really appreciate her looking up at this gentleman as they pedal down the street.
Next up is Have a Cookie, Sean Sullivan.
This is nice still life, well lit, but for me, there's one key thing I think that's off, and I don't know why the photographer chose to do it this way. And I think looking at it, you know, we as people, English people, I guess, we read left to right. So the image is kind of balanced left to right, where I start at the left, I have a mug, and then I go right and I have a bigger teapot. And to my eyes, that's definitely more pleasing, the small to the big, going left to right. But the awkward thing about it is the mug handle is turned towards the right. And I'm guessing that was the attempt to balance with the spout of the teapot. But it's unnatural, right? I wouldn't have my tea mug in. I'd have it on the out so I could grab it. So I think you need to turn that tea mug so it's pointing out, and then you can turn the teapot the other way so it's kind of angled out. And then that would continue to mimic the shape of the plate, which is maybe what you're attempting to do. And then I'd put a little bit of tea in that glass because everything else seems well organized with the little cookies and cupcakes. But I'd put a little bit of, brown tea in that mug, so it wasn't just a big white spot there. So I think interesting idea, but a few little tweaks might make it a little bit more successful.
Next up is Balancing on a Flower, Sharon Silversmith.
Nice job capturing a sharp image of butterflies, much like the bee we saw before. They do flutter around, so it's hard to kind of get them kind of stop action. The antennae, I wish the one wasn't encroaching on the one stem in the background. And this is another case where the background just gets very busy for me. There's a lot going on, some bright colors. They're brighter than a lot of the butterfly or moth. And so this is a case where you have to say, do I really need those flowers there? I'm barely including really any full flowers or no full flowers. So I don't think you need all that space. I'd almost crop out the left side with the buds there, and crop out the top with the bright flower that pulls my attention away, and the other bud. And then you have just kind of a square image of the butterfly sitting on one flower that's well lit. You still have some distraction in the background, but I think it minimizes it a lot more if you come in a little tighter for this one.
Okay, next up is rough sea fishing, Sharon Silversmith.
Nice capture of a moment here, gentlemen out fishing on the surf. I would have loved to have you take a step to the left, include a little bit more space in front of him and a little bit less space behind him. But other than that, it's a nice photo. Nice kind of, it's a low light photo, but enough lighting on him it's interesting. And then the rocks and the waves, create a lot of interesting background to kind of set them against.
Next up is The Watcher, Thomas Whitmore.
This is interesting, coming down at this kind of lower angle. You're more, looking up at the horse here, or maybe he's looking down at you from his perch. Well lit on the horse. Horse is having some nice kind of side light on him. And then good job, getting some interesting clouds in the background there. Almost seems too perfect, but I think they're natural. But yeah, so it's kind of a nice, pleasing picture. I maybe would have cropped in just a little bit because you're down at this low level. You get that perspective, the post angling in. I don't think you needed to show the vertical post of the fence on the right and left. I just crop those out a little bit and just have the diagonal slats and the horse. It'd keep your attention in. It would make you crop the edge of that one cloud, but I think that's all right. And I think that would really just emphasize the horse on the railings.
Okay, honorable mentions. First up, The Big City, Bill Lanahan.
So really nice job on this one. You've done a good job controlling your perspective. I don't know if you did that in camera or if you did that in post, but good job keeping all the buildings straight. And I love this kind of lone lane of cars shooting down here with a long exposure. So just really nice kind of pop of light and color there, but then wonderful little evening light on the rest of the buildings around this. So really nicely composed. Love that perspective kind of going in there to the busy city in the middle with all the lights.
Next honorable mention is Pocket, Doug Mitchell.
Lighting on this model is really good. The reason this one kind of stayed honorable mention and didn't kind of rise a little further was two things. One, I wasn't quite sure about the background. We have this model. She's kind of dressed like maybe like a mannequin or some type of doll. But then she's set in an alleyway with a bunch of trash cans on the left. So it didn't seem like the background was the right place for her, right time. Being in the city wouldn't be a problem, but maybe being indoors, like she's in a factory being made or something like that, might have been a more appropriate background. But the biggest thing for me that kind of made it hard for me to appreciate is her right arm, the left one, the left of the frame, holding the umbrella. It just seems twisted at a weird angle. I would have loved that umbrella to be angled a little differently, maybe her hand brought in a little closer to her or something, or a different angle. It just seemed, I know she's trying to be like a mannequin and not, humanly posed, but just the angle seemed very odd to me in that umbrella. And it's almost like the umbrella needed to like twist forward and come down a little bit. But the lighting on her and the technical execution is really well done on this one.
Next up is Feather, Joe Petronio.
This is a nice, macro detailed shot, and these ones seem kind of simple to do from if you haven't done these before. but it actually is kind of challenging. And I've done some close-ups of feathers before, and it is hard to get them really sharp. Whether you use a macro lens or some other types of techniques, it just can be really tricky when you're working at this kind of macro level to get really nice sharpness. So this one, well done, really nice sharpness. I love the play of the orange on the black. The kind of vertical line here in the middle, this, I guess, the stem or center part of the feather, little jaunting to me. It's almost like it's not quite in the middle, like it's 50-50. It's about 40-60. Maybe I would have liked that to be on a slightly different angle, or maybe a little different offsetting between the two sides. But the sharpness is really nice, and the lighting is really nice in this one. That's why I got the honorable mention.
Next honorable mention is Shutters, Kim Kozen.
This one's really nice, nice study in design with just lines and the shadows, creating more lines and diagonals, just wonderful light on this building. I love that the main facade here in the middle is brightly lit. And then we got some shadows on the more recessed windows on either side. To me, it seems like it's angled a little bit to the right. It's almost like you need to straighten it up like 10 degrees to the left to vertical, but very nicely seen. But I try to just tilt that a little bit, play with your perspective a little bit in post-processing.
Okay, and our winners. In fifth place, Jedi, Sean Sullivan.
Really interesting studio shot here. I was kind of studying it for a while, trying to figure out, was it one really well executed single frame with different lighting, or was it compositing the lightsaber in after the fact? And I gave up trying to figure it out. But really nice lighting on her, great lighting on the face. We're showing just a little bit of the left side of the face as she draws back that cloak. An interesting light on the hair there. So very interesting. I think for me, the reason this didn't rise a little further, it's supposed to be like at night and you're coming across this Jedi. I would have loved to have just a really dark background, but something I could at least see to kind of set her in a location instead of just a jet black background like coming out of the night. But very well lit and executed. I like your post-processing too, kind of the texture feel you gave to the model here.
Fourth place, West Danville Footbridge, Ron Klein.
So much like one of the other ones you saw in the barn, really nice job with that softness to it. This can be done with filters, or it can on your camera, or it can be done post-processing, but it really gives a nice kind of glow, nice softness to it. Lots of just little pops of color here. Nice balance with the water and the rocks, the bridge coming in. So it's just, to me, it was a nice, pleasing photo with a lot of different elements to it. A lot of times people use bridges, just take it broadside. And I don't think that would have been the right approach for this one. So having it at this angle where you can show some of these other elements in the scene was really the right choice. So nice job on this one.
Next up is Autumn Morning, in third place, Bill Lanahan.
This one real pretty with these rays coming through the trees. Done a good job, keeping that bright sun up out of the frame, or mostly obscured by the trees. So I can really just appreciate the soft light coming down here on the grounds, and all those wonderful rays cutting through the trees, and then all those trees in wonderful silhouette. Just really adds a really nice element to this one.
In second place, St. James, Doug Mitchell.
This is a great, city scene, and I love how you just filled the frame. I see no tops of buildings, no edges. It's just all lines and shapes and colors. You could almost call it an abstract because you're not really focused on any one element. It's just that play of depth and colors, and we got the wonderful balance of the tannish brown building on the right, kind of balances with the left. And then we got wonderful pops of color in the background with the blues and the greens. So just really excellent composition and excellent execution of sharpness throughout this, the depth of this image.
In first place, Buttermilk Swirl, Neil Shapiro.
This one, I just love this scene. Just a lot of nice elements really coming together. We have the waterfall, but then we have the swirl on the right, which is hard to find instances where that occurs. And you could have just focused just on that right half of the screen, and that would by itself have been a pretty image. But I love how the photographer, and this is why this one got first place, I love how the photographer went for the wider view to say, okay, I can show you a pretty waterfall. Everyone's done that. But let me show you a wider field where I can show you some interesting golden trees here on the left, a little bit of the rock wall, and just more and more elements, just more for me to just look around and explore. Having the waterfall off center, it's still bright and white, still draws my attention as a beautiful thing, but it just, now it's a piece of a larger, bit prettier picture. And then great job controlling the sky too, which is very hard when you're trying to get the shadow detail here in the foreground and not blow out the sky. So just well executed, but mainly excellent composition on this one.
Congratulations to all our winners.
Thank you. Thank you, Neil. Good deal.
And now we can move on to the monochrome category. We have 42 images. We had 5 places and 5 honorable mentions.
Yeah, a little bit more number of entries, so I gave you one more honorable mention, I think, in this one.
So jumping right in, first up is Waiting for the Train, Alan Wiggins.
This one, I studied this one. There's a number of images where my feelings weren't immediately, didn't come to me immediately. And this is one of those images. And so I studied this for a while and trying to really kind of analyze what parts of it I liked, what I wasn't quite sure about. And you have this wonderful perspective lines coming in. This looks great in monochrome. That was a really excellent choice by the photographer. And I kind of like also the play of all the people on the left side and no people on the right, except there's one lone person in the back, kind of doing a counterpoint of people versus no people. So there's a lot of interesting things going on to this image. And I liked it. It was nice. It just didn't rise to the top of some of the other images we'll see later.
Next up is Domed, Alan Wiggins.
Yeah, so this one, and the title kind of alludes to it too. Interesting to capture this woman with the dome umbrella, the white dome umbrella that mimicked in the background with the white dome of the building. For me, unfortunately, the thing that kind of hurts the image is the guy here on the left. It's got this, I don't know, expression just doesn't work for me. I think if he had not been there, it's just a woman and some more breathing room around her. I think that would have been better, but I think with the pairing of those two, it didn't work for me. And I know, street scenes, you got to get them while you get them, and you can't always have the people, in the optimal placement. So just how it goes. So for me, the balance wasn't off. It was a little off on this one.
Next up is Too Many Battles, Bill Lanahan.
I like the look on this guy. I'm not sure if he's just squinting for someone or scowling at you, but definitely an interesting character. I liked how you come in tight on him to show around him. I think I would have trimmed off just a little hair off the left. There's this pole in the upper left corner, probably a tent pole. Don't need that distraction of white background. So I would just trim a little bit off the left there. And then with black and whites, really think about where you have white in the image and where you have black in the image. It's important to have both. In this one, we have some really, really dark grays and some pretty whites. But I think the contrast needs to be pumped up just a little bit more. And I think also it would add to the intensity of this guy a little bit more if it was a little bit more heavy contrasted image.
Next up is Tough Conditions, Bill Lanahan.
So this one's a better example of having whites and blacks and then all the shades in between. These little craggy trees here on the right, balanced by the interesting clouds in the upper left. So a lot of interesting bits here. But then we have this real plain section here in the middle. and my eye kept wanting to go to there, like looking for a fox to be running across or a snake to be slithering or something or other. It's almost like you framed out that center spot, but then there's nothing there for my eye to kind of gravitate to. So I think for me, that made the composition a little off. I love the area and good processing, but I would have had it balanced somehow differently, so it doesn't appear like I'm framing something that's not there.
Next up is street vendor, Dan Steen.
This one is, I'd say this is what I like to call is in between shot. It's not quite close enough to be a close up or a sharp close up. It's not quite far enough away to show more wider field of view. So this one, we see the gentleman here. We can't really see all of his face, which usually it can be okay. But we see a lot of this, whatever he's cooking, I can't even quite make it out because there's so much steam there. So I feel like he needed to come in a little tighter, get rid of some of these distractions in the background, like these people behind him waiting in line for another food truck. That way I can maybe appreciate the guy's face and his interesting hat a little bit more, maybe be able to decipher a little bit more what he's cooking there. Or I would have gone a wider field of view and show him in the context of what's probably some sort of food truck park or some sort of road with lots of street vendors or something like that, and show more wider field and show him in contrast to the rest of the scene. So think about that is, what are you trying to show? And if it's the street vendor, his expression, and the interesting thing he's cooking, then make that the star of the show. I don't need to see the bits of building and the bits of other people, which don't add to his story, unless you're trying to do that wider field of view and then show him in context of the greater story. So think about that next time with your composition.
Next up is Street Children, Cholon Saigon, 1967, Dow Smith.
So no date limitations on these photos. And when I was reviewing these, I did kind of glance at the titles, but I really didn't pay them all that much attention. I usually try to just appreciate the image for what it is, and not try to be swayed by the title. Just FYI. So this is cute with these two kids here. I would have loved if the kid on the right was at least partially turned towards me. But I think for me, the distraction here is that upper right corner. There's a bright white sheet. And when my eye keeps wanting to be drawn there, it's not the brightest white in the image, but it is a big chunk of white. So my eye just wants to go up to that corner like I keep wanting to think it's an adult leaning over them or some other person, but it's not. I think it's just some sort of drapery on an awning or something like that. But it's very distracting, and I think that needs to be toned down. And given the date of this, this must have been film that's been subsequently scanned. So if you scanned it, now you got Photoshop at your fingertips. I would just tone down that upper part of the image so the focus stays down here on the kid, holding this oversized umbrella.
Next up is Cemetery, Isle of Skye, Dow Smith.
This one had a lot of nice elements to it. Had a very dark, contrasty, almost kind of grungy processing to it. It's a lot of interesting elements, but I couldn't really appreciate one over the other. So I kind of was finding my eye moving around, that kind of finding a home to land on. We have this interesting collection of tombstones here on the left. The one is merging with the tree. I would have rather you take it a little step to the right so we don't have that merger. And then we got bright tombstone here on the right, but I'm not close enough to be able to read any of the tombstones. Not that that's necessarily intention of the photo. And then we have the kind of background. And so it's kind of like that picture we saw in the color of the temple, like in Thailand or something like that, where a lot of interesting elements, but I think the photographer needed to isolate down what are the elements that were most interesting to you. And if it was a scenic, take a one step back, go a little wider, show me a little bit more of the view. If it was the tombstones against this mountainside with this interesting tree, I would come in a little tighter and kind of emphasize that a little bit more. So to me, my eye was kind of going all over the place on this one.
Next up is on the Georgetown train, Lena Kesey.
So this is interesting, and I want to say really this is here in Colorado because I see Silver Plume on the one train. I know there's a Georgetown back east, but I don't think of a train like this. So I think this one is here in Colorado. I haven't taken that train from Georgetown to Silver Plume, but yeah, it's an old time train like this. And this one, it kind of, I don't know if it gave me a chuckle or got me confused that the train is backwards pushing the cars. So I'm guessing there's an engine probably on both sides and it goes one way and then reverses and comes back the other way. Nice with this kind of perspective, curving that in to the train. But for me, I don't know, the train being backwards on there, and if that's kind of your emphasis, I don't get to really appreciate the engine because it's obscured by the people car in front of it. So to me, it just kind of made it a little off for me having in that orientation. But I do want to say good job on the black and white conversion on this one. Some nice jet blacks, whites, backgrounds controlled really well. So really good job on your processing.
Next up is Echoes, Lena Kesey.
This one, interesting idea with these translucent leaves, and they're kind of falling, and I was kind of studying them like, yes, each one's unique. They're not, they're all separate from each other. So it's an interesting artistic thing with these little highlights and kind of lines and seeing through them. So creative. I think the arrangement for me didn't work for some reason. I think maybe the one at the bottom being kind of upside down versus the ones on the top are kind of folded over. The orientation being different kind of threw me off maybe a little bit. So I think maybe just play with the arrangement a little bit differently. But interesting processing on this one.
Next up is Valentine, Fred Moody.
Interesting kind of street scene. The Victoria's Secret model there against a woman, and I don't know if he did this in post or it just happened to be how the blur was, but it's like the black line across her eyes, like making her anonymous. Really kind of added to the picture. For me, the balance again. I seem to be repeating myself tonight with balance. You have this picture of this advertisement of the lingerie model. It takes up, if you look at it, like more than half the real estate of your image. And then you got a wonderful job blurring this person marching by. I just wish that the person was a little bit bigger in the frame to more balance out the person. So it's really more point counterpoint with the size of the model in the picture and the size of the person walking by. And I guess you'd have to maybe get down at a different angle to kind of create that. But really interesting texture. I love that motion blur that you've captured with her.
Next up is Misty Morning, Janice Pritchett.
Really good job with this one with the mist. Mist can be very challenging to photograph and capture it well. And so you've done a good job capturing the mist. For this one, it's about the perspective. We have on the left side of the frame, lower left side of the frame, we have this trail moving up, and it's a big wide trail, takes a very commanding part of the image, and it leads me, and it basically in my mind dead ends because I can't quite see the turn that it makes to go over the bridge. But the logical side of me tells me that's exactly what happens. And then if I was a butterfly, it could fly up and to the left, I would see it bend around the corner and go over this bridge there in the center of the frame. But I'm not a butterfly floating up 5 feet off the ground over on the side. So to me, it looks disjointed, right? Because this wonderful path, nicely softly lit, leads and then almost dead ends. And then I have this right part of the image with the mist and the bridge and the little trees and stuff like that. And that's interesting. But I can't connect them because the path ends. I can't see the connection. So really something to think about when you see paths or roads. If they go in and out of your frame and you can't see the connections, think if that's going to be a problem or not, or if you need to get a higher vantage point so that you can see the connection of the path, which I think is needed in this case.
Up is Black Church, Janice Pritchett.
Mhm.
And someone's unmuted. I like that this give points for creativity for this one. I think this church is in Iceland, or at least there's a church like it in Iceland. I haven't been to Iceland yet. It's on my list, like so many other places. And so I like that the different viewpoint that the photographer is given of this well photographed church, that this is the one in Iceland, showing it from the backside. And so you can appreciate the stone wall. I think for this one, I would have cropped in a little bit. I don't think we need all that dead space on the left of the church, and the wall would come in that. Maybe a 4x5 cropping again for this one would be good. But the stone wall is well treated in black and white. It makes a good balance to the church, which has that metal modern look to it. And then we have, I guess, kind of foggy or just overcast day in the background, which works well. But I think a little bit too much wall, as much as I love rocky walls, a little bit too much on the left. I'd crop a little bit of that out, and I think it would be a little stronger composition.
Yeah, next up is New Sweden Evangelical Swedish Lutheran Church. That's fast. Janik.
Again, with your titles, I want to title it Church and Fog. So again, fog, it is challenging. It seems like, oh, you have wonderful soft light. I don't have to worry about highlights. All true, but you also have to worry about contrast and worry about, you can still blow out highlights in fog. So another good job controlling the fog here. In this case, we got some really nice contrast though with the tree trunks and some of the darker parts of the image. So that's well. This one again, I think we got a lot of nice elements going on. We got that curving road leading you into the church. I don't mind that the church is partially obscured by the couple of trees there. But then on the right, we have a little bit of fence and a little bit of tree. And I debate whether we need that. And so I want to say this is one of my in-between photos where I'd rather have you come in a little tighter and show just the road and the two center trees in the church, like a square crop, or maybe go just a little wider and show a little bit more of the darker part of the right. Oh, someone's saying almost crop. See, I'm not reading all the chats that come in. I'm catching some of them, but not all of it. And show me a little bit more of the darkness on the right there with that fence line and some of those darker trees that aren't quite as much fog. That might have created a nice counterpoint to the foggy, strong angles of the church on the left side of the frame. So consider a square crop on this one. And I think that would work better. I don't think you need that half a right tree and fence on the right.
Next up is Soft and something. I lost the title of this one.
Soft and cuddly, I think this one was, or something like that. But yeah, this little dandelions or whatever. So this is a photo that's been, I've seen this kind of photo done many times, but I really give the maker points for creativity because it's a little different than other ones I've seen, in that we don't have a perfectly circular dandelion. It's almost more of a heart shape if you look at it, or teardrop shape maybe. And so that was kind of refreshing. And I love the post-processing you've done to this one to create this soft, really kind of pastel-y look to the edges of it. So we really focus on just that sharp part in the middle. So yeah, very interesting photo. Just very, very kind of soft, but definitely a well photographed subject matter, call it.
Next up is Beach Days, Kim Koza.
I love the clouds on this one, and this is why I'm not much of a landscape photographer, because I don't like photoshopping in perfect clouds. So here's a case where we got really creative, really interesting clouds, but then my foreground kind of is like womp womp, and it kind of isn't as impressive. And I think for me, there's a couple things going on here in the foreground. We've lost some contrast. Converting to black and white, if you just click the black and white button on your computer, you're going to get an image like this where it's a little muddled, and it just you need to go rebalance the blacks and the whites and the contrast. Even the most basic photo editors should have a contrast slider that you can move around to darken some of the darks. And I think that would really make the figures and this kind of tent in the foreground pop out a little bit more. But as it stands now, it's the same shades of gray. So it all kinds of merges with the background. So then it becomes very cluttered. And we do have this interesting girl with this little ponytail coming in here from the right. And so she was the kind of most interesting part of this bottom part of the image. But I can't really appreciate anything else because it all just merges together. So just something to think about as you process these kind of images.
Next up is Autumn, Larry Hill.
I didn't quite get the title of this one, Autumn. Other than I guess the trees have lost their color. But interesting, still life done indoors. I like the vase and how we're seeing just a little bit of the vase. It's off center. We got some interesting branches. But when you're doing this kind of still life, I'm assuming this is done inside with your black backdrop or whatever. So I really get really critical in my assessment when it's a studio shot because I feel like you have unlimited time to get everything just right. Not perfect. I don't want to say perfect, but just right. And so this one, we're missing a leaf here. There's too big of a gap here on the left between the third and fourth leaves because the one is up. I think if this is a studio, you could have bent that, forced it over to kind of fill that space. We'll get a little bit of bright light on the third leaf from the left. And a little bit too bright on the leaves on the far right. But I think the thing that really kind of hurt this image for me was these darker leaves that are here in the center, right above the vase. They appear to be almost a different style, different type of plant. The leaf shape is a little bit different, and they're darker. And so I don't understand why the photographer, assuming this is a studio shot and he didn't just Photoshop out the background and post-production and make it all black. Assuming it's a studio shot, I don't understand why that was included because it's dark. I can't really appreciate it. It's different shapes, so it doesn't really match. So maybe after the judging, if you want to share any thoughts with me. So that kind of really took away from me because my eye sees that vase, and that's the first place my eye goes is to the vase. And I go up from the vase, and the first thing I see is these dark leaves I don't understand. And then I start to explore the rest of the image.
Next up is Adirondack Layers, Linda Tomasula.
Really pretty idea. You've seen these kinds of things done before, which is layers, which is really nice. This is something that you could print out really big and wide, sofa size, and will look very interesting. Kudos to the photographer controlling your shadows here in the foreground with those trees and not allowing them to go jet black. So we're still seeing some layering even in the trees there in the foreground. And then that just banks of fog in there, just really create nice layering to this image. And good job not including too much sky because there wasn't really much going on in the sky. It's just probably late in the evening or early in the morning. So good job with your composition on this one, and just a wonderful color palette with this, with the shades of blues and kind of dark greens.
Next up is Beach Fence and Shadow, Linda Tomasula.
I liked the elements of this one with this wavy sand coming across the shadows of the beach fence there. I think this is one where you could probably come in a little bit tighter. I don't need to see the water at the top. To me, the image it's about lines and shapes. That's why it's excellent in black and white. That's a good choice there. But we almost are half and half, right? Photography rule number one, don't put the horizon in the middle, but also don't put it along the diagonal either. So you kind of have half sand, half fence. So I would have changed that perspective. So one or the other had 2/3, more of a 2/3, 1/3, or 60-40, some type of spread that's not 50-50. Because if you look, you can almost draw a line from the lower left corner to the upper right corner and split that image in half beach, half not beach. And I don't think you need that water and that surf. To me, it's all about those lines and those shadows. So make it all about that. Just like that, the cityscape we saw in the winning category in the color, just fill the space with the good stuff, right? The lines and the fence, cut off the top of the fence. That's okay. We don't need to see the top of the fence. We don't need to see that ocean. Cut that off, maybe come in a little bit, cut a little bit of sand off. We don't need to see where the fence ends. That's fine. We can cut in that. And then I think that would be more of a yin yang kind of composition that would be a little more pleasing.
Next up is the cat next door, Marguerite Hill.
This one's really cute. I have a cat at home too. He never sits for portraits. I try to take a photo of him and he just comes at me asking for food. So good job getting the cat to stay still. Interesting look on the cat. This image is well composed. You've done a good job blurring out the background. Cat's got a great look on his face, a little catch light in his eyes. This one was really close to honorable mention for me. This one I think just lacked a little bit of contrast. Would have liked to play it, make it a little bit darker in some areas, so it just punched a little bit more. I think that's an easy fix that you could do on the computer, just bring him out or her out a little bit better. But wonderful composition, good lighting, just a few more tweaks, and you'd bring it up into the ribbon category.
Next up is the crossings, Marguerite Hill.
So here's kind of the opposite, where we have really good contrast in this image. It's really punch to it. And we're seeing some blowing out of the sky, and that's all right because there's only a little bit of the sky there. For me, it's about this foreground, right? We have more than half of the image, maybe 55, 60% of the image is the reflections on this water. The reflections are pretty. And we got a couple of ducks here, and the one in the background I can't really make out, so they're kind of just blends in with the background. But it's almost like the photographer wanted to showcase these two in the front, but then the biggest, most promising one is in total shadow and not really in focus. So I question, why did you want to show me that one? I'd almost crop him out and just make it more of a scenic with the one duck here in the center, framed up by this kind of arrow created by the bright lights on the water coming towards him, and then make it a little bit more scenic. And then try to bring out a little bit of shadows in the background so maybe we can appreciate a little bit of that tree line and building. So interesting scene, but I think crop it slightly differently to really showcase what you want me to see.
Next is Crossing Realms, Neil Shapiro.
This one's nicely executed, really nice sharpness to this. Good spread of colors, of luminosity, shades of gray. So really great job on your post-processing with this one. Nice detail there in the background on those trees. And this is one, the bridge is kind of leading me over. I wish it was maybe leading me to something. I know you don't necessarily need to always lead the audience or the viewer to something, but I would have liked maybe a little different contrast in the trees or something on the other side of the bridge to kind of lead me in. But it's well executed. Good job kind of making it almost squared off, even balance left and right. So very nice. I just wish there was a little bit more of a payoff at the other end of the bridge for me.
Next up is Erie Canal Abstract, Phil Olivo.
So yes, I just didn't get this one. I'm maybe someone that's more into modern art or something. I don't know. I mean, I usually like minimalistic. An engineer by trade, so I definitely like tubing and shapes and stuff like that. But this one, I just wasn't quite sure what to make of this. It's like, is the handlebars? Is it a reindeer? Is it just a bunch of pipes showing interesting shapes? I didn't know what to make of this one. So maybe I'm just not the right judge for this one.
Next up is
Sorry, Phil.
Phil Olivo.
So Phil, much better on this one. I can get this one a little bit more. I think those are the same Phils. So nice processing on this one with the kind of sepia, some people say. I like it. We got interesting kind of light on the barn there. Wonderful clouds in the background. And so this one was interesting to me. I liked it. It didn't quite rise as high as some of the other ones that, well, I guess we'll see here in a minute that won the places. But nicely done, good composition, kind of balancing everything out.
Next up is Flurry Walk, Rich Schreibstein.
This one, kind of like the other path one we saw, I see what the photographer is going for, right? We have a dark mass on the left and with the road, and we wanted to counterbalance that with the white on the right. So good job there. We got a curve of the road on the left, curving off, and it's balanced by the curved bridge on the right. And so I can kind of get in the mind of the photographer maybe what they're trying to accomplish. But to me, the balance just isn't right. It's almost like you could, if you kind of put your hand up, you can cover the left half of this image, and it's the snowy bank with the curved bridge in the background. You can cover up the right part, and it's a great photo of a solitary man on this desolate road in a snowstorm with some interesting background. And so I kind of feel like you've taken two photos, and it's half of the two photos meshed together. And so it's another case where, you know, we're starting off as photographers. One of the things you hear about is the rule of thirds, right? 2/3 of one part of the image that you really want to emphasize, and 1/3 of an image that maybe part of the image you don't want to emphasize. And you always have to follow that exact mathematical equation, but there's a reason for that because it creates a pleasing balance. So it really showed what's the most interesting part of the image. And to me, it's that man on the road in the snowstorm. He's separated out. He's not merging with any trees. I think you could show half of that curved bridge across that frozen lake. You could crop this almost as a square with the left half. That would, I think, be way more powerful of an image than the way it's set up now, where it's half and half.
Next up is Veni Vidi Selfie, Ron Klein.
Yeah, so all these ladies are posing, I guess. Can't quite make out what they are, but interesting with the shadows coming through, and they're almost perfectly framed out in between the columns there with their shadows. So it's interesting to me. It seemed like a little bit of a grab shot. I wasn't quite sure what I'm trying to get out of this image. I think if you're trying to focus on the selfie, I would come in a little tighter, maybe just showing one or two of the ladies with the other lady on the left taking their photo. As it is now, I got this other person here on the left. I'm not quite sure. I guess her hand's up. Maybe she's taking a photo too. There's just a lot of different things going on. I wasn't quite sure where to go. And I think this is one where more is not more. So I would have come in a little different angle, or a little tighter, so I can appreciate what the people are doing a little bit more.
Next up is Strolling Along, Sally Wilson.
This is one where interesting idea of capturing a person with a really nice wide stride, catching right at the right moment to kind of mimic this interesting statue in the background. But I think you need to wait one more moment for them to take one more step, maybe the right leg forward, left leg back, so they're not merging with that statue. So then you can really see the comparison between the two of them. And I don't think you need maybe as much as the sky and the building in the back as you showed here. You probably could crop it down a little tighter. But to me, it's that merger of the striding gentleman and the statue pillar there. It does work for me.
Next up is Serious Contemplation, Sean Sullivan.
This one, I'll raise my hand and admit right off the bat, I'm not a fan of this type of processing. Some people love it. Obviously, this photographer, Sean, sorry, you liked it where it's this, I don't know if it's the Photoshop filter, whatever it is, but gives this kind of wet oil painterly look. It's just not for me. And so I will just raise my hand and admit this is not for me. Another judge might have no problems with it and think it's the perfect treatment for this image. The composition is nice. I love the man with his hands clasped. Nice little light on there to kind of bring emphasis to that, and then a little bit of light on his face amidst his kind of hooded head there. So composition is nice. Love that background with the infinity kind of bridge there going in the background. Really kind of balances against the man there in the contemplation. But for me, like I said, personal, sorry, this type of processing just doesn't. It's not for me. So that makes it hard for me to rate this one a little higher.
Next up is Tree on the Hill, Sean Sullivan.
All right, well, Sean, I didn't like your last one, but I like this one a lot better. And I know this one also has some heavy processing to it too. But I don't mind it in this case. I think it works with the textures of the trees, that wonderful starburst there coming through the tops of the trees. So this one, even still is a little grungy and kind of heavy-handed for my particular taste. I like this one better with this kind of solitary tree and interesting dappled light there in the foreground. So interesting.
Next up is Mournful, Sharon Silversmith.
I like this one, and this one almost got an honorable mention. It was so close. Just nice little sweet baby cow, is it? Poking its head through. I love the little soft light on the fur of the fur. It's his skin or whatever. It's fur. I guess it is. Fur of his face. It's really nice highlights on there. I would love for you to just give a little bit more shadow recovery to his eyes, so they pop out just a tad bit more, especially that one on the right, his left eye, to give a little bit more catch light in there. But wonderful framing here with the wood window and the stone, or I guess it's another piece of wood. Anyway, wonderful framing, and I like the treatment here. This kind of soft, velvety. I just want to reach out and pet him. He just looks so fuzzy. So interesting on this one, but there's just a few more photos in the gallery tonight that just edged you out. But I really like this one.
Next up is Morning Walk, Sharon Silversmith.
So this one, this one, when you see photos like this is how I interpret it. And we mentioned in the beginning some of the photographers that I like Andre Cortez and even some of the work of Stiglitz or Steichen, where they captured people and people just in everyday life. I encourage you to check out Aubrey Bodine. He was a photographer from Maryland. He was a staff photographer for the Baltimore Sun. His daughter has a wonderful website of many of his images, and you can buy a lot of his books. Anyway, he was very great about capturing just people out and about, just doing everyday things. And so this kind of reminded me of that kind of style where we're just kind of capturing someone just going about their day, walking their dog, kind of interesting looking gentleman with this kind of big coat, got some interesting little lights and shadows on it. And this dog that looks very well fed. He is not ready for Muscle Magazine, but interesting dog. But for me, it's when you do something like this, it's very simple and straightforward. We got to kind of nail some of the elements, and I think having that pile of, I guess I don't want to say trash, but a tuft of grasses or whatever in the background just really distracts from me. And maybe the thought was it kind of balances out the dog, the man, the pile of junk. You great threes are better than even numbers. But for me, it just takes away from the image. And I think that's something that's very easy to clone out. You can clone stamp that out in pretty simple editing tool. You can do it right in Lightroom or whatever processing tool you have. Clone stamp that out and just get more beach. And I think that would really add to this image because the guy has this kind of quiet, kind of meditative look to him. Maybe he's just kind of quiet morning walk with his dog, just thinking about the day or whatever. And then I see this big dark mass to his right, my left, that really draws my attention away. And that was just a blank canvas, a blank beach, or I'm guessing that's what this is. I think that would really add more to the mood of the isolation, out for him by himself on a walk. But as it is, I think that's a distraction for me. But try removing it if you can and see what you think of the result.
Next is Lady on the River, Thomas Whitmore.
All right. And I hope I'm not doing too, please let me know if I'm doing too much blabbing. I try to give as much critique as I can. But if I run overtime, just let me know. So this is interesting. And there's two images in here. I'm assuming I didn't check the names. Oh, I guess I couldn't see the names. I'm guessing they're by the same person because they appear to be the same homeless person. Oh, it looks like your pot. Can you guys hear me still?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, my AirPods just died on me. I find that, and sometimes if I talk too much, the batteries burn down quicker. All right, so I'll switch to just normal computer audio. So there's two pictures of this lady here, homeless lady, and
I really like the other one better. This one from the back, I can't really appreciate what is going on. This person wrapped in some type of white thing. I guess it's some sort of sleeping bag or comforter or something. Can't quite tell. So I'm not quite sure what's going on here. And it's just everything's very tight in. And I just really didn't kind of get this one. So let's move on to the next one. And hopefully they're in the same order. And you'll see the same person from a different angle.
And it's Lady in the Park too, Thomas Whitmore.
There you go. So I think this one's a better composition. Now, the other one, the person's more isolated because they have the woods in the background. They're far away. They're blurred out of space. And this one, you have the cars and maybe you're feeling it's a little more cluttered. But I kind of like this one better. I like being able to see a little bit of her face. She's separated more from the cart now. So I think that's a little bit more pleasing. The cart's on an angle, which is a little more pleasing. And at first I wasn't sure about the cars in the background, whether that was distracting or not, but I kind of like it in that it shows, her isolation, assuming this is a homeless person here, bundled up in some found sleeping bag or comforter or something like that, show her isolation with all this civilization right behind her. These all cars look really nicely newish cars, look like rusty junkers to kind of show, how little she has, which is probably everything she owns is probably in that little cart there. Yet there's all these really nicely cars like right behind her, like it's just so close to getting help or getting assistance. And I know homeless people, it's more complicated than that. So I think this one speaks more volumes, even though it maybe appears as a more busy picture than the previous one from the other angle. But I think this one is the better choice. Because of that busyness, the elements just all jive together a lot better.
Okay, next up, honorable mentions. First up, Butterfly, Donna Funk.
All right, so we've seen some other butterflies tonight. So this one I think is more on the mark from, if you remember the comments I had before, where we have a bright background, but it's blurred out enough that it's okay. So that the butterfly is more isolated. Its antennae are easy to see there. And we still have this nice, bright, sharp flower at the bottom. So there's just a more pleasing composition. Good job with some blacks and some whites and all shades in between, which is really what you want for a nice, strong black and white image.
Next up is Moses, Fred Moody.
So this one, at first I was like, oh, I wish there was more shadow. I wish I could see more of the shape of the person. But then the more I studied this, the more I liked the silhouette and his hands upstretched. I don't know if this is you got your friend to dress up and took this photo, or if this is some sort of statue. Perhaps I maybe don't want to know. But it's interesting framing, very interesting processing on this one. It's kind of that over the top kind of grunge look. But you kind of need that for this because you have this really heavy silhouetted person. So you need some other elements to really balance that out so it doesn't seem like a big black void. But we can see enough of the outline of the man that looks interesting.
Next up is Sunflower, Kim Koza.
This one's neat. It actually reminds, we were talking about Stieglitz earlier. It reminds me of a Stieglitz photo. He took a picture like this of a back of a sunflower past its prime. I also like the slight bluish tint you had to this image. I don't know if that was intentional. That's just how their processing came out. But interesting texture and look to this. Just it's kind of chaotic, but kind of organized, and just interesting little highlights on this flower.
Next honorable mention is Skyscraper, Ron Klein.
This is kind of a classic technique of getting really close to a building and looking up. But this one is interesting because the clouds reflecting in that top part of the building, the glass, almost looks like the clouds are on top of it, like the building's encased in mist, just the way they're reflecting there. And maybe you'll tell me you added that in later, but I don't want to know. But it's very nice how it's done. I love the layering as we go up into the clouds there.
Next up is Patterns and Reflections, Sally Wilson.
This one, I loved a lot of the elements of this, and I really wanted to give it a place, but There was a few tweaks I think it needs to get out of the honorable mention and up into the top 5. I love the angles and the crisscrosses you created that you found here and witnessed here. The balance of the image is really good. A couple little nits, and I think you could trim a few little things. It would really just emphasize those shapes there. The very top of the image, we're seeing where these, I guess, cement pylons of some bridge are connected with the main bridge. I don't think you need any of that. To me, I love my eyes focusing on the bright part of the X and the crisscrosses in the middle of the frame. My eye goes up and wants to see in between those little support braces and the little bright spots at the top. And you don't want my eye going anywhere else, but staying right there in the middle of the frame. So I would crop down so we just come right to the top of these triangles and crop off that top, 3% of the image. Don't think you need that there. And then maybe a hair off the right. And maybe you have to do that as you crop, unless you crop at a weird angle or weird aspect ratio. But I think just taking that little sliver off the top will really keep your focus here in the center. And that's where the action is. And that really looks great.
All right. And our winners in 5th place. Get my good side, Neil Shapiro.
Yeah, this one just really nice with this. I guess he's like a snapping turtle, alligator snapping turtle, something like that. That eye is unreal. I don't know how much processing you did to bring it out. I've seen snapper turtles. I don't recall their eye being so prominent, but just really nice with just the texture, right? We're really seeing just the folds of skin. This is a big, mature turtle. It's probably a pretty good size. This is where we get nits here. And this is how I place the top 5. I have to go down to the nits. But I love these little kind of, not horns, but little spikes on his right arm here on the left side of the image. I wish you'd kept just a little bit more of them so they weren't cropped off the way they're cropped off, like show a little bit more of them or cut them off entirely. I just feel that's the cutoff there. And then there's this one little piece of grass on his gowl, on his throat there by the claws. It's really bright. I would just tone that down a little bit. You could Photoshop it out. That would be phenomenal. Might be a little tricky, but at least tone it down so it's not this bright white curve drawing my attention in. But otherwise, really nice portrait of this guy. Looks so cute.
In 4th place, window fan, Rich Schreibstein.
This one just has a lot going on for. I really liked a lot of the elements of this one. Interesting expression on the man. His hand is close on his face, but it's not too close to obscure his eyes or glasses. He's got contact with the camera. But for me, what really makes this image is the car door, which really you would think would not be focus of the image. But having him through the triangular shaped, polygonal shaped of the window, and then the side view mirror, and then we get some other angles from the rest of the car, just really add some other nice elements to it. I just wish there was a little less glare, either a little less glare on his glasses so we could see a hint of his eyes, a little bit more hint of his eyes, or more of a full glare, so they're more like mirrored shades or something like that. And I mean, those are the glasses they are. This is the way it is. But wonderful composition on this one.
In 3rd place, Una, Doug Mitchell.
All right, so if you've seen my website, I do nudes too, and do a little different style than Doug's style here. So I'm happy to see a club showcasing this because I know a lot of clubs don't allow it. A lot of times, I know when I try to compete some of my nudes, judges get very squeamish, like, oh my gosh, it's a nude person. I've never seen one before. I don't know what to say. Thankfully, I'm not that kind of judge. I've actually been to art galleries and seen nude art, and it's all okay. And so this, it's very tastefully done. So this one's very nice. I love the processing on this. Someone says Doug's portraits are amazing. Yes, so I love the process on this soft, ethereal kind of look. Model's got a wonderful pose. So, all the credit goes to the model. They do most of the work. We just got to be there and be in the right direction. But seriously, a lot of post-processing, I'm sure, went into this one. The reason this one didn't rise to a little higher to the top was there's a couple little things. And the main thing for me was Doug only does outstanding ... Someone's saying, okay, sorry, I got to stop looking at the bottom of the comments coming up. The upper left corner is just a little bit too dark for me. My eyes, everything else in the background is the perfect lighting, right? We have strong lighting on the model. So my focus really goes to the model and the nice highlights on the model. But you want a little bit of background to kind of set the stage, but not too much that draws my attention away. And so done a great job keeping that windows in the top center, softened down. So they're bright, but not overpowering. And we got these doors on the right side of the frame, noticeable, but again, not overpowering, not competing with the model. But then the upper left part of the frame is much, much darker. And I know it's not benefiting from the light from the window, but this is not realism anymore. So I think you just need to bring out the shadows a little bit, because my eyes are like, what are those? Is that roses on a pedestal? Is it a stack of curled up towels? Like, what's going on there? So I need just a little bit more shadow detail in the upper left. And then one other little thing, and I know you're doing this to try to bring out the model and show her form and show her shape. I think you brought out her left arm a little bit too much highlight there. Clearly that's where the light is coming from, or where you've made me think the light is coming from, upper center, kind of raining down on her. That arm should be in almost total shadow. And the hand you can see is in total shadow, but the mid arm, I've darkened that a little bit. To me, is a little distracting. If you darken down that arm a little bit, it would keep focus on the main part of the model and the other arm with the bend in it. So I think there's a couple little tweaks to this would really bring this image up another level for me. But otherwise, well done on the processing. I'm sure this is a lot of effort to get this particular look in post-processing.
In second place, Giraffe Mugshots, Joe Catronio.
This one, I just kept coming back to this one. And part of me is like, it's so simple. There's other images like the one we just talked about that took so much effort in editing and tweaking all the lighting and stuff like that. And part of it is like, it's just so simple. But sometimes if it's simple and done really well, that can be better. And so here's a case where, it's probably an overcast day or whatever, and then the photographer just blew out the background to really focus on these giraffes. Great expressions, the two different ones. Love the lighting on them. The contrast on them is nice. It's just really fun image. And so simple as it may seem, I kept coming back to it going, I just really like it. It's just really pleasing to look at.
And our first place winner, Fluttering and Dancing in the Breeze, Jana Kaywood.
All right, so this one, I debated for a long time for the top three, because all were, as we can see, the giraffes, the nude, this tranquil scene, all very different techniques used in processing, very different abilities as far as capturing scenes. So all very, very different. That's what makes these general categories very difficult. But I took this one as first place because to me, it just had, everything was perfect. I really couldn't find anything I didn't like about this image. Everything was blended perfectly, wonderful. We got shadow detail, but we got some dark shadows, a nice balance. We got some rim lights here on some of this thing, a nice softness with the fog, this strong element of the tree here on the right, then backlit. So we're seeing through the trees, seeing the pricklies of not pricklies, but seeing the kind of individual leaf detail, which is a nice balance to the kind of more soft, mushy-ish left side. So just lots of different things. I could just stare at this picture all day long. And so when I tell myself I could stare at it all day long, that's the picture that's got to be first place. But all the top three were really good. Needs a Griffin. Jenna, and Richard. Someone wants to make a fantasy image.
Great images. Thank you to our judge. Anybody have any questions now? You can feel free to unmute.
Great comments. Thank you, Greg.
I appreciate it. So I do have a question about the person. Is Doug online with the model?
No.
Oh, I want to know who the model was. If it was I have a friend on the East Coast, and he's always looking for new models. So,
Her name is Una. I've actually photographed her before, so.
do you know, does she have a Instagram page or website or?
I don't know. I can find out from Doug. Doug's the one who books her, so.
Okay, yeah, find out and send it to me. I'd love it. I have a friend that does I don't want to say 90%, 85% of his work is fine art nudes. And he's in Maryland. So if she is from the East Coast or travels up and down the East Coast, I'm sure he'd love to book her. He has a home studio. And that image was well done. So any comments from me or questions for me about any of your photos or?
I put Doug's website on the chat.
Oh, yeah. I'll put all the things that he, all the photographers he mentioned in case people want to look them up, but I'll have to do that quickly. I did mention him if no one's has many questions to do. I always give the judge a chance to show some of his favorite work. And I know we're running late tonight, so I apologize, but we do run till 9 often. So if you have a short one, Greg, that would be great.
I do. Yeah, I pulled together a few photos here. Let me go ahead and share my screen here.
Will that Sean, can you do it? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right. So I just kind of went through my portfolio and showed. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So I just kind of grabbed a smattering of some photos just from the last couple of years. And so I kind of picked these somewhat strategically to one, kind of showcase some of the work I do, but also to hopefully give a little bit of a teaching moment along the way. So this one, I really love this one. It's my photo. I'm really happy with it. But what I'm most happy with this one is this was shot with my iPhone. This was processed on my iPhone using Snapseed. And I thought it really came out well. And so I wanted to showcase this one to show that we all have these big expensive cameras and we go to these workshops and learn all these photoshopping techniques and all this wonderful stuff, which can be great and create great images. But sometimes you can create great images just right out of your phone, right out of your smartphone you have with you. So this is not high resolution. If I tried to blow this up to a large size, the resolution would die away. But just to show that even with your iPhone and some basic. Yeah, someone's got a hot mic. So even just with your smartphone, you can create some compelling images and just process them right on your phone and get some interesting your black and white images right off the bat. So I also do work with fine art nudes. This is shot in Utah last year in this canyon. And so I do a lot of this where I'm looking for shafts of light and really I'm not trying to show the complete model or any of the complete surroundings. It's really more of an artistic thing I'm going for. So we found this kind of shaft of light going through this narrow canyon. And so most people would probably do an HDR and show all this many stops of light. But I went the other way and just did a single image and just really showcased this kind of arrow of light kind of leading to this model. And then she did Venus de Sierra is the model's name, did a wonderful pose there, kind of catching the light on her face. Also like to go to Old Car City outside Atlanta, Georgia. It's a wonderful collection of old cars. The owner claims to have 4,000 cars and trucks on 34 acres in the woods. And they're all in various states of decay. But this thing was a particular workshop I did at night there where we did light painting. So this is a composite of about 20 or 30 different images, lighting different parts of the car and then stitching them together in Photoshop to kind of create this look. So this is just the old kind of truck in the barn. I just love the play of the brown of the truck against the brown of this barn thing that was around it. And then doing it in light painting can really add kind of interesting light and color palette to it. This is in Hawaii. This is a silver thorn plant or something like that, silver sword plant or something. So I like a lot of close-up stuff like this, kind of like the cityscape we saw tonight, would just really just fill the frame with everything. So I'm kind of just filling the frame with this plant and just lines going everywhere. A little bit of a high key where I'm losing, whites, detail on some of the whites, but that's all right. So it's just about the shapes and kind of this explosion of lines everywhere. I also love to do abstracts of tree roots. So I look for trees that have fallen down or fallen over. This one is
That's
actually,
nice.
yeah, thanks. This one's actually in Arches National Park. Went there over the spring break this past year, and beautiful arch rock formations. And here I am kneeling on the ground, taking a picture of this fallen over tree root, and just trying to find an interesting balance of shapes and kind of light. And this one, the light wasn't quite like this on it. I did a lot in post-processing to kind of highlight bits of the wood and darken other bits. So just kind of all kinds of little curves and swerves kind of going through this one. I have gazillion photos like this, and many people don't get it. They don't like it. They don't understand what it's about, but that's fine. I like it. I love it. And I will continue to photograph thousands more of these, regardless of what anyone else thinks. And so that's why I want to showcase this one is you got to photograph what you love. I mean, yeah, I was maybe critical on some images tonight. If that was your image and you didn't agree, that's fine. That's just my opinion. So anyway, that's why I want to showcase this one. So work with models, did some models in a pool. And so I'd ask the model. So this is one where you can call this serendipity. So the model's in this yellow nightgown or something like that. And we've put a piece of black cloth on the opposite side of the pool. And I have my camera in this kind of semi-submergible housing. So the camera's about a foot underwater. The model's across the pool. And I asked the model, just fall into the water, almost if you were pushed or you like passed out and fell into the water. And she was a true sport. She did this several times, and each time she's getting water run up her nose and whatnot. So I'm sure it was not, did not feel well for her doing, but she was, like I said, a real trooper. And so I'm looking at this image when it comes in, and I'm doing rapid fire. I'm doing like 12 frames a second on my D4. And I just capture this moment. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like a perfect reflection. And it looks like some type of owl or bat or something like that. And so there's nothing you can plan for. And it just goes to show that sometimes you set up interesting conditions, but sometimes you just got to fire away. And you hear people talk about, well, spray and pray technique. That's what the amateur photographers do, and you'll never get a good shot. But sometimes when things are in motion, spray and pray for something. Sometimes you end up with a really cool result. So if you look closely, you can see her arm there in the left kind of forming the one kind of ear and the bottom of the eye socket, and then obviously her body and her legs forming the one side, and then it's reflected in the top surface of the pool. And then a lot of editing post-process to bring out the color and the look of this. Also, Old Car City, I love doing close-up abstracts of the textures and patinas on the side doors or the sides of the cars. Many of these cars look like they've probably been sitting there for 40, 50, 60 years, just rotting away, some of them slowly sinking into the ground. But the layers of paint, I'm sorry, it's a question?
I think someone sneezed.
Okay. So you just get the layers of paint being peeled away, and then there's just water stains, in this case, rust or different whatever, something has been splattered on here. So I'm just kind of looking for an abstract shape, just not really a picture of anything in particular, just colors and shapes, and trying to find a pleasing composition. Here's another light painting example. So this is one of the ones I did just this year. It turned out really well. Probably 30 some images here. And so with the light painting, I'm able to get these light streaks along the car to emphasize the edges and the ridges of the car, really make this really kind of three-dimensional, kind of pop out. But to my naked eye, it looked like the background there, where you can see a car, barely a hint of a car in the background. It was pitch black, 9, 10 o'clock at night. And then lighting this car with a panel LED and then stitching it all together, you get this look. It's a fun technique if you've never tried it. And I think that's all I had. Yeah, I just grabbed a handful there for you.
Appreciate that.
Any comments, questions?
I just want to let you know, I think that's some of the best critiquing I've heard in years.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, I
Appreciate
agree.
that.
Really good. Really
Yeah.
good. I mean, you critique the hell out of a couple of mine. So I'm actually going to go as soon as this is over, and I'm going to see what I can do with what you
Yeah,
said.
so one thing I told people, and maybe my critique style is somewhat natural, but I have a lot of photography books, like a lot. Like when Neil read out my bio, it said like over 100 books. I counted the other day, probably shouldn't have. It's approaching 200 now, to the point that I had one shelf with a bookcase, and then I had half the bookcase. And then I started encroaching on the entire bookcase, and wife's like, "No more. You must not exceed your bookcase." We have a second bookcase, and that second bookcase is my bookcase. And once you fill up your bookcase, you're done. And then my bookcase got all full. I looked kind of sad, and I came up with some more books. I'm like, what am I going to do? And wife's like, all right, well, I'm not using the bottom shelf of my other bookcase, so you can put some books over there. And I've taken over that whole bottom shelf, and now like I'm out of space. And she's like, well, you could put some ones you don't look at too frequently up in the closet. I'm like, well, I guess so. So anyway, I look at a lot of photographers' work, and as mentioned in the intro, I look at all kinds of stuff. I have books on nudes and books on rusty cars because I love photographing those things, but also have books on street photographers and portraiture, and architecture and other things I don't necessarily photo a lot. And so I try to study the photos and say, what appeals to me about this photo? What doesn't appeal to me? A lot of times I'll get these books and the photo on the cover page or the photo that has the double spread, I just don't like it. And I'm like, well, clearly the publisher thought this is one of their best images. That's why they put it on the cover. They put it in the double spread. And I look at it, it's like, I don't get it. And so then those are the photos I study the most to say, why don't I get it? I don't have to like it. But why doesn't it resonate with me? And I think that's helped build my critiquing style, because I really learned to pick out what elements are working, what are not. You heard me talk a lot about tonight about point and counterpoint and balance and weight, and all those kind of visual things. And I have another presentation, you want to invite me back sometime, about design elements in black and white photography. I just created this year, only presented a couple of times, but I kind of talk about some of these elements, and that might help some of you people that I had commentary about your compositions.
Great. Well, I think everyone appreciates it. You did a great job. So
Great, thank you.
Kudos.
Great, appreciate it.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks a
Thank you,
lot.
Greg.
Great.
Thank you very much, Greg.
thank you,
Thank
Greg.
you.
All right, everybody.
Happy holidays.
All right,
Yeah,
yeah.
holidays, everybody.
Christmas,
Yeah.
happy holidays for everyone. Enjoy extra time off.
Yeah.
Between Christmas and New Year's. So see you then.
All right, I'm gonna scroll through the comments real quick before I jump off. Love this. All right.
Yeah.
All right, you all have a great night.
Good
You
one.
too.
Hey,
Night,
Greg.
everybody.
Thank you.